By the time my husband told me he had already filed for divorce, the pasta water was boiling over on the stove, and I was standing there with a wooden spoon in my hand thinking I had maybe another 30 seconds before I needed to turn the heat down. That is still what I remember first. Not the word divorce, not even his face. Just the sound of water hissing against the burner while Owen stood 6 feet away from me in our kitchen and said something that should have cracked my life open, but somehow landed with the calm, careful tone of a man rescheduling a flight. "Leah," he said, "I need you to hear all of this before you react." I turned the burner off and looked at him. He was still wearing his work clothes. Navy button-down sleeves rolled once tie gone, that faint clean smell of soap and office air still on him. He had set his keys down in the little ceramic bowl by the door the same way he always did. Nothing about him looked wild or guilty or broken. If anything, he looked prepared. That was what hurt first. How prepared he looked. I remember saying, before I react to what he did not answer right away. He walked to the table, pulled out one of the chairs, and sat down like he had rehearsed the angle his body should take for this. Calm, open, reasonable. He slid a manila folder across the table but kept 2 fingers resting on it. "I filed this afternoon," he said. "The papers should be served formally in the next day or 2, but I wanted you to hear it from me first." For a second, I genuinely did not understand the sentence. My brain caught on filed and papers in afternoon, but not in the order he meant them. Filed what? His eyes lifted to mine and I saw it then. Not grief, not panic. Relief maybe, or something close to it. For divorce. The kitchen went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum. I sat down because I suddenly did not trust my legs. "You filed," I did. "You already filed." "Yes." Not, "Do you think we should separate?" Not, "I'm unhappy." Not, "I don't know how to fix this." Filed. Done. Process started somewhere without me. I stared at the folder. My name was typed across the top page in a neat block of legal print. Leah Bennett, respondent. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Owen. What is this?" He exhaled like this was hard for him too, and maybe that was the worst part. He had already found the right face for it. The sad, measured one. The one that made him look like the adult in the room. "This isn't about anyone else," he said. "I need you to know that first." I had not even said there was anyone else. He kept going before I could answer. "We've been off for a while, you know that. We've both been feeling it. I think dragging this out would just hurt us more." I looked at him and thought, we have not both been feeling the same thing. "Whatever you've been feeling, you got there without me." "What do you mean you filed this afternoon?" I asked. "Without even talking to me?" "We have talked, Leah." "No, we haven't. You've been distant. That is not the same thing." He rubbed one hand over his jaw. Calmly, thoughtfully, like he was dealing with a difficult client and trying not to escalate. "I'm trying to handle this respectfully." The word respectfully sat between us like an insult. I do not remember much of the next few minutes in order. I remember him saying things like clean process and easier this way and no reason to make it ugly. I remember the stove light over the counter making the kitchen feel too bright. I remember thinking that the man in front of me had somehow already crossed the emotional bridge I was just now being told existed. Mostly I remember the tone. He spoke like the marriage had ended somewhere I had not been invited. After a while he stood and said, "I packed a few things already. I can stay with Daniel for a couple nights if that makes this easier." Packed a few things already. I looked past him, then really looked and saw what I had missed. The black duffel by the hallway wall. The empty space on the hook where his grey weekender usually hung. The charger missing from his side of the bedroom outlet. Small absences. Quiet ones. The kind you can live beside for days before your mind lets them become meaning. "You packed before you told me." He paused just barely. I thought that might be best. Best for who I wanted to ask all. But even then, even with my throat burning, some stupid reflex in me was still trying to keep the room from becoming a scene. That had been our marriage more than I understood while I was inside it. Me absorbing discomfort before it had the chance to inconvenience him. He left a little after 8. He asked if I wanted him to leave the folder, or if I wanted space first, as if the damage might somehow be softened by good administrative manners. I told him to leave it. He nodded once, took the duffel, and said we should try to be kind to each other through this. When the door shut behind him, the duplex did not feel empty. It felt arranged. I walked through every room slowly, the way people do after an accident, checking for pieces of something they cannot yet name. In the bedroom, his top dresser drawer was half cleared. In the closet, 6 or 7 empty hangers sat pushed together on one side. In the hallway cabinet where we kept paperwork, our lease renewal folder had been moved, and next to it sat a separate bank file with tabs I had never made. In the living room, a framed photo from our trip to Charleston last spring was gone from the bookshelf. Not broken, not misplaced, gone. I stood there staring at the clean rectangle of dust it had left behind and tried to remember when I had last seen it. That was when the last few months started rearranging themselves in my head. Owen canceling dinner with my coworkers because he was wiped out. Owen taking phone calls outside more often. Owen telling me not to wait up because quarter end at work was a mess. Owen kissing my forehead instead of my mouth. Owen asking practical questions in bed, like whether I had renewed my car registration while my body was still turned toward him, hoping for something softer. None of it had looked dramatic enough to name. That is the humiliating thing about quiet betrayal. It asks you to participate in your own confusion. Around 9:30, I called my cousin Mara from the floor of our bedroom closet because it was the only place in the house that felt small enough to hold me. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, you okay?" "No," I said, and then started crying hard enough that I had to pull the phone away from my face. Mara waited. She always did. No fake soothing, no rushing. When I could finally breathe again, I told her. Not beautifully, not in order, just the facts. He filed. He already filed. He had papers. He packed before he told me. He keeps saying respectful like that is supposed to make this clean. Mara was quiet for a beat. Then she said, "How long between telling you he was unhappy and actually filing?" I wiped my face with the heel of my hand. He never said it like that. Not really. He just got colder. And he already had paperwork ready, yes. And he's pushing quick. Yes. Another pause. Then Mara said very calmly, "Fast is not the same thing as honest, Leah." I leaned my head back against the closet wall. Somewhere in the living room, the refrigerator kicked on again. My whole body felt hollow and hot at the same time. "I don't want to turn this into something ugly if it isn't," I said. "That isn't what I said." Her voice stayed level. "I said do not let his speed become your obedience." The next morning, I barely slept, barely ate, and still made it to work because habit is a powerful drug. I smiled at patients, confirmed appointments, answered phones, and felt like I was watching another woman use my face. On my lunch break, I called a divorce attorney one of the women at the clinic had used 2 years earlier and got squeezed in for a late afternoon consult. Her name was Evelyn Price. She had silver blonde hair cut blunt at the chin and an office that smelled faintly like lemon polish and printer paper. She read through the filing summary with the kind of expressionless attention that made me trust her almost immediately. When she finished, she set the papers down and folded her hands. "You do not need to sign anything immediately," she said. "I know," I said. He keeps saying dragging it out will make it worse. For him, maybe." I looked up. She did not smile. "Ms. Bennett, some people genuinely want an efficient separation. That happens. But the pace he is requesting here is unusually aggressive for someone presenting this as calm and mutual. That does not prove misconduct. It does mean you should not let emotional shock rush your decisions." I felt something inside me shift then. Not relief. Something sharper. The rush was not only hurting me, it was telling on him. When I got home that evening, Owen was already there. He had let himself in with his key and was standing at the counter drinking water like he still belonged to the version of the day before yesterday. He looked at my face and knew immediately I had done something. "You talked to a lawyer." I set my purse down carefully. "Yes." He nodded once, still calm. "Okay. I'm not signing anything yet." There it was. Just one sentence. For the first time since he had said the word divorce, something in his expression moved too fast to hide. Not rage. Nothing that obvious. Just a tightness around the mouth. A brief hardening in his eyes. Irritation clean and controlled. "What is there to think about?" he asked. The question landed wrong. Too fast. Too flat. Like my hesitation was an inconvenience, not a grief. I stared at him. And for the first time, stronger than heartbreak, stronger than shock, I felt it. He was not just hoping I would go quietly. He needed me too. "What is there to think about?" Owen asked it like the answer was obvious. Like I was the one making something simple difficult. I looked at him across the kitchen island and understood more clearly than I had the night before that whatever this was, it had already moved past emotion for him. He was in logistics now. Timing, signatures, access, efficiency. "For me," I said. "Quite a lot, actually." His jaw shifted once. "Leah, I'm not trying to fight with you." That was another thing I started noticing once I stopped trying so hard to save his comfort. He was always defining the tone before I even spoke. He was not trying to fight. He wanted to be respectful. He did not want this to get ugly. Every sentence came wrapped around the version of himself he needed to preserve. I picked up my purse again. Good. Then don't. I went into the bedroom, shut the door, and leaned against it until I heard him leave. After that, he became more careful and more present at the same time. That sounds contradictory, but it wasn't. He texted more. Not loving texts. Not apologetic ones. Practical ones. Did you review page 4? We should decide what to do about the lease by Friday. Let me know when you're available to go over furniture. Dragging this out will only cost us both more. Always calm. Always polite. Always somehow pressing. By the 4th day, I could feel the rhythm of it. He would send one message in the morning, one in the afternoon, one in the early evening. None of them openly hostile. None of them strange enough to show another person and say, look how cruel he's being. But together, they created pressure. Tiny administrative taps against the side of my head until I felt like he was trying to keep me off balance by sounding reasonable. Mara noticed it too. He's hurting you, she said one night when I was at her condo sitting cross-legged on her couch with my phone in my hand. Not yelling, not threatening, just trying to keep you moving at his speed. I stared at the last text from Owen. If you're free tomorrow, maybe we can finalize some of the smaller things so this doesn't keep hanging over us. It's like he's allergic to delay, I said. Mara looked over from the kitchen where she was slicing an apple. That's because delay is bad for somebody. The thing that started the next turn in all of it was stupidly ordinary. That is how these things keep happening in real life. Not with dramatic music, not with a lipstick stain or a hotel key. I was going through our joint checking account to pull statements for Evelyn when I saw a transfer I didn't recognize. $800 3 weeks before he filed. Then another one smaller 9 days later. The first had a memo line, CH Medical. I frowned at the screen. Owen and I usually use shorthand I recognized. Rent, power, car, mom, gift. None of this meant anything to me. At first, I thought maybe it was work-related, something he had fronted and been reimbursed for. But there was no reimbursement. And when I went back another month, I found a different payment linked to the same initials. Not from our joint account this time, but from the credit card statement we still both had access to. A charge from a women's imaging center across town. I read the line 3 times. Then I closed the laptop and sat very still at my desk. It would be easy to make too much of that, I told myself. There were 100 explanations. Billing mistakes, family help, office nonsense. But the problem was not the charge alone. It was that I was starting to feel the shape of something even before I could see it. That weekend, one of the wives from Owen's office circle, technically not a friend, more a woman I had done brunch with twice and smiled beside at one holiday party, posted a photo carousel from a networking fundraiser at a rooftop bar downtown. I would not have looked twice if Mara had not already taught my eyes to slow down. Owen was in the background of the 3rd photo. He was turned half away, drink in one hand, talking to a woman in a cream dress with dark hair pulled back low at her neck. Nothing about the image was intimate enough to convict anyone. But his body was angled toward her in a way I knew. Attentive, slightly softened, familiar. The tag under the photo named 6 people. One of them was Celeste Harper. I clicked her profile before I could talk myself out of it. It was a professional page more than a personal one. Clean headshots, event photos, industry panels, real estate development, community partnerships, polished captions about leadership and growth. The kind of woman people described as impressive. The kind of woman who knew exactly how to be looked at. I felt sick and stupid immediately, not because I had proof, because I had become a woman searching another woman's face for evidence that my marriage had been rearranged behind my back. Still, once I had her name, I started seeing it. An old charity email where Owen had mentioned a Celeste helping coordinate sponsor tables. A photo from a company holiday dinner in December where she stood 2 people away from him smiling at something outside the frame. A caption on someone else's LinkedIn post, thanking Owen Bennett and Celeste Hopper for their shared vision on a local development partnership. Shared vision. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe it meant exactly what it looked like. The next week, Daniel Reeves called me. He did not text first. He called, which was somehow worse. I was in the clinic parking lot halfway through a protein bar I did not want when his name came up on my phone. I almost let it go to voicemail. "Hi," I said. "Hey, Leah." He sounded like a man who already regretted dialing. "I hope this isn't inappropriate." My whole body went cold. Why would it be? A pause. Car noise in the background. Then I heard from Owen that things are moving fast. Moving fast. Even then. Even through someone else's mouth, I said nothing. Daniel cleared his throat. I don't want to get in the middle of anything. I really don't. Then don't, I said, sharper than I meant to. Another silence. Then he said quietly, I think there are things you should probably know before you sign anything. I closed my eyes. We met that evening at a coffee shop in Green Hills, where nobody from Owen's office was likely to wander in. Daniel looked the way guilty, decent people always look when they have waited too long to do the right thing, slightly rumpled, over-explaining with their hands, unable to hold eye contact for very long. He kept saying he did not know everything. I believed him. That was part of what made him useful. What do you know? I asked. He looked down at his coffee. I know Celeste and Owen have been close for a while. The while hurt almost more than the close. How long is a while? He hesitated. Longer than the filing. My throat tightened. Did he tell people they were together? No. Not exactly, but there were assumptions. What kind of assumptions? He rubbed his forehead. That they were heading somewhere. That there had been overlap. That once everything was official, it would all kind of make sense. Official. Everything was official. Like I was just a legal condition slowing down a rollout. I kept my face still because I wanted him to keep talking. There was a dinner in January, he said. A few people from the office plus partners. Owen brought you up late like he wanted to make a point of it. Said you were swamped with family stuff and couldn't come. But later that night, he left with Celeste. January. In January, Owen had come home smelling like bourbon and smoke from the patio heaters downtown, kissed the top of my head and told me I would have hated the restaurant anyway because it was too loud. My stomach rolled. Daniel kept looking miserable. I'm not saying I handled any of this well. No, I said. You didn't. He nodded once, accepting it. Then he said the thing that broke the room in half. There's also talk she's pregnant. For a second, everything inside me went soundless. Not because it was impossible, because it made the speed suddenly legible in the ugliest, simplest way. Of course, he wanted me gone quickly. Of course, he wanted signatures and neat paperwork and no delays. He had another life pressing against the walls already. I laughed once and it came out thin and wrong. Daniel looked at me with something close to pity, and I hated that more than I can explain. When I got back to my car, I sat there with both hands on the wheel and tried not to cry until I was home. I lasted 11 minutes. That night, I let myself believe I understood it. Another woman. Pregnancy. Deadline. Brutal, humiliating, ugly, but simple. It would have almost been easier if it had stayed that simple. The next morning, Evelyn emailed asking for one more set of statements if I had them, anything showing unusual transfers or shared obligations in the last 90 days. I forwarded what I had already found, including the CH medical payments, and she wrote back 30 minutes later. Can you send the full statement around those dates? There may be context in adjacent entries. So I pulled the archive PDF from January and scrolled slower this time. The first transfer was there, the medical charge was there, and 2 lines above it, almost hidden because I had skimmed too fast before, was something else. A certified check fee. The image copy was attached in the bank portal. I clicked it open. Pay to the order of Harpeth Ridge Apartments. Memo Unit 4B deposit. Purchaser Owen Bennett. The date was 6 weeks before he filed. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. An apartment deposit. Not after he decided the marriage was over, not after some sudden mistake or panicked pregnancy scare, before, while he was still sleeping beside me, while he was still asking me if I wanted Thai food on Fridays, while he was still standing in our kitchen acting like this had all become clear only recently. I think that was the moment the deepest truth of it reached me. He had not been reacting to a situation. He had been building one. And when I looked again at the memo line, at the quiet neatness of it, at the date sitting there like a knife pinned flat to paper, I understood exactly why he needed me divorced so fast. Because if I slowed down long enough to see the timeline, his whole clean story would collapse. Because if I slowed down long enough to see the timeline, his whole clean story would collapse. I printed everything that night. The apartment deposit, the medical charge, the transfers. The statements from January and February. I laid them across my dining table in a row so neat it almost frightened me. Dates had always calmed me. Schedules, intake forms, appointment grids, the order of things. And for the first time since Owen said the word divorce order, started giving something back to me. Not comfort, power maybe, or at least the end of confusion. Evelyn met me the next morning and I watched her read through the stack with the kind of stillness that told me more than words would have. When she finished, she tapped one finger on the apartment deposit. This matters, she said. I know. No, she looked up at me. I mean legally, yes, because it speaks to financial conduct during the marriage. But I also mean it matters because it breaks his timeline. This is not a man who suddenly realized he needed a divorce. This is a man who had already built the next step. That should have shattered me. Instead, it steadied me. By then, the pain was no longer coming from uncertainty. The worst of it had changed shape. I was not dying 1,000 little deaths wondering if I was imagining things. I was staring at proof that I had not imagined any of it. The distance, the pressure, the unnatural calm, the urgency. He did not need me to understand. He needed me to move. Evelyn asked if I wanted her to request a formal mediation before any further signing or division discussion. I said yes. My voice sounded flatter than usual but not weak. Later that afternoon, Owen texted, checking in. I really think dragging this out is going to make things harder than they need to be. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. I've asked my attorney to arrange mediation. We can discuss everything there. He did not reply for 12 minutes. Then, if that's what you want. That was another thing I understood too late. Men like Owen loved the sentence "if that's what you want" because it made your response sound optional, emotional, almost indulgent. As if the real, reasonable path had been his all along. Mediation was set for Friday morning. I did not sleep much the night before. Not because I was afraid I would lose my nerve. That part was already over. I barely recognized the woman who had spent the first week trying to decide how not to make things uglier. By then I understood that ugliness had never depended on my tone. It depended on what he had done. What kept me awake was grief, plain and stupid and human. The kind that arrives after clarity, not before. I kept looking at ordinary things in the duplex and feeling the humiliation of how normal our life had looked while he was quietly moving around inside it with another version already drafted somewhere else. His coffee mug still sat in the cabinet because he had left it, the blue one with the chipped handle I had teased him for never throwing away. I stood in the kitchen at 1 a.m. holding that mug and thought, you were putting down an apartment deposit while asking me if I wanted salmon or pasta for dinner. That was the part no bank statement could hold. The double life of tone. The way betrayal could sound like, have you eaten and drive safe? And I might be late tonight. Friday morning, he arrived at Evelyn's office in a grey jacket and white shirt, clean-shaven, composed, carrying a leather folder. He looked exactly like the man he wanted the world to see. Controlled, reasonable, mildly sad. A good man trying to end a difficult chapter cleanly. For 1 weak second, the old reflex stirred in me. The one that wanted to keep everything civil, keep my voice soft, keep the room smooth. Then I remembered the apartment deposit dated 6 weeks before he filed. The reflex died. Evelyn led us into a conference room with a long wood table and a pitcher of water in the center. Owen gave me a small nod, like we were meeting for something routine. Leah. I sat across from him. Owen. He folded his hands. I'm glad we're doing this productively. Even then, even with the floor already opening under him, he could not stop narrating himself as the adult. Evelyn began with procedural language. Property lease timeline disclosures. Owen answered evenly. He said he wanted fairness. He said he hoped we could avoid unnecessary hostility. He said he had never intended to blindside me, only to spare both of us prolonged pain. I let him speak. Then Evelyn turned to me, Mrs. Bennett, is there anything you'd like entered into the discussion before we move toward proposed terms? I opened my folder and slid the first document across the table. Owen looked down at the certified check copy. I watched the exact second recognition hit him. His eyes changed before his face did. This, I said, is the deposit for Unit 4B at Harpeth Ridge Apartments, purchased by you 6 weeks before you filed for divorce. He said nothing. I slid the next pages forward, the medical charge, the transfers marked CH Medical, the surrounding statements. This is from January and February, while we were still living together, while you were still pretending none of this had already started. His jaw tightened. Evelyn said nothing, which was one of the reasons I trusted her. She did not jump in to rescue the moment. She let the truth take up its own space. Owen leaned back in his chair. Leah, I'm not sure what point you think you're making. That almost made me laugh. My point, I said, is that you filed for divorce like this was a recent emotional decision. It wasn't. You were paying for the next stage of your life before you even told me the current one was over. He looked at Evelyn, not me. I'd been considering separation for a long time. Considering separation is not the same as signing an apartment deposit while sleeping next to your wife. His gaze cut back to mine then, and I saw it. Not shame, irritation, a clean, sharp annoyance that I had stepped outside the role he had written for me. This is exactly why I wanted to handle this privately, he said. You're trying to turn pain into a prosecution. No, I said. You turned your dishonesty into paperwork. The room went still. He exhaled through his nose. This isn't about another person. The lie was so old by then it almost sounded tired. I pulled out one more page. Not evidence from the bank this time. A printed email Daniel had sent after our meeting, brief and careful, confirming the January dinner and the assumptions inside the office about Celeste and Owen long before the filing date. I put it on the table. It is, I said. And even if it weren't, the overlap would still matter. He did not touch the page. I kept going because by then I understood something important. The power in that room was not in making him confess. It was in naming the truth clearly enough that his refusal no longer mattered. Celeste is pregnant, I said. That explains your deadline. But it doesn't explain the whole timeline. The whole timeline is that you had already begun financing and arranging a future with her while still using our marriage as cover. Socially, professionally, legally. That is why you needed me to sign quickly. Not because you were trying to be respectful, because you were trying to close the window before I could see what was inside it. For the first time he lost the expression, not dramatically, nothing so satisfying. But enough. What exactly do you want from me, he asked. There it was, the question beneath all the others. Not what did I need, not what had he done, what did I want from him now that I had stopped cooperating. I looked at him and felt something inside me unhook. I wanted a husband who would tell me the truth before he started building another life, I said. That's over. What I want now is accuracy. Evelyn cleared her throat gently then and began speaking in her precise, even way about amended disclosures, financial review, and updated separation terms. Owen interrupted twice. The second time he sounded sharp enough that even he seemed surprised by it. By the end of the meeting, the performance of mutual confusion was dead. He was not a man sadly exiting a marriage that had run its course. He was a man whose timing had been seen too clearly. When we stepped into the parking lot afterward, he caught up to me before I reached my car. You did not need to do that in there. I turned and looked at him. The sun was too bright. The asphalt shimmered a little. He stood with one hand on his folder, the picture of controlled offense. Yes, I said. I did. His mouth hardened. You're acting like I committed some kind of crime. No, I said. I'm acting like you wanted me to carry a lie because it made your life easier. For once, he had nothing polished ready. He looked tired then. Not remorseful, just tired in the way people look when the version of themselves they prefer has stopped working. I got into my car and shut the door before he could say anything else. The legal process did not become kind after that, but it became honest in the places that mattered. Financial disclosures widened. Certain dates stopped being vague. Certain expenses stopped being explainable. Owen and I did not have some final tearful reckoning where he confessed everything beautifully and I floated away healed. Real life almost never offers that. What it gave me instead was smaller and better. He could still move on, he could still become a father, he could still tell himself whatever story helped him sleep. But he could not do it while pretending he had handled me honorably. That part was gone. A week later I went back to the duplex alone to finish packing the rest of my things. The rooms looked larger, emptied out. Sadder too, not haunted, just stripped of the little daily habits that used to make them feel like proof of something solid. I wrapped dishes in newspaper, took the frame prints from the hall, cleaned out the bathroom drawer where I had once kept backup razors and hair ties and medicine for both of us, as if taking care of one life naturally meant tending the edges of another. When I reached the kitchen cabinet, I saw the blue mug still there. I stood with it in my hand for a minute, thumb resting on the chipped handle. Then I put it in the donation box. Not because I was above anger. I wasn't. Not because I was healed. I wasn't. But because I finally understood that I did not need to keep every object that had survived the lie, just because I had. By the time I carried the last box out to my car, the sky over Nashville had gone soft with early evening. The air was warm in that tired end-of-day way, and somewhere down the block somebody was grilling, the smell drifting faint and sweet across the street. I set the box in the passenger seat and stood there with my keys in my hand. That was the image I carried afterward. Not the bank statement, not the conference room, not even his face when he realized I knew. Just that moment, the weight of the keys, the warmth of the steering wheel, my own reflection dim in the car window, a life still bruised, still unfinished, still lonelier than I wanted, but mine again. And for the first time since he slid that manila folder across the kitchen table, I could feel the difference between being left and being erased. He had tried for the second one. He didn't get it.